Stay tuned until the end of the episode so you can find out how to win a free signed copy of Pearl Jam Live. Hey, everybody, now welcome to Live on Four Legs. Today, we got a special interview lined up. We've interviewed authors on this show before, many of them, including Stephen Hyde and Ronan Givoni, who did the Present Tense, Not For You in the Present Tense book, and even including some other authors, Tiny Kang, who did the I Am Mine book with all the imagery that I've was thankful to be a part of. And today we have another Pearl Jam author on our show, Selena Fragassi, who just wrote a book right here. I'll show it to you guys. Pearl Jam Live. And if I can even get it in frame, 35 years of legendary music and revolutionary shows. This is a nice looking book. I really enjoy the layout and how everything is put into this. It's a really easy read. And for anybody that's a Pearl Jam fan, it goes through the whole entire history and talks a little bit about the live stuff. So, Selena, thank you so much for coming on and great job with the book. I really, really enjoyed the read.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the nice compliments. And yeah, the design team did such a great job with it.
Yeah, you don't, again, the books that I mentioned, like Long Road and Present Tense, they're not a lot of them have are image based. So
Mm.
this is a little bit more interactive. Was that something that you wanted early on in the production of the book?
Yeah, I think it was really a team effort with the publishing group I work with. They're very much into collectible books, which is what I love. Like I want tangible products in any kind of music piece I have, whether it's a record or a book. And so they do these really nice hardcover books with a lot of photography. And for me, it was really important because I wanted this book to focus more or less. I mean, there's a ton of history, but on the live career of Pearl
Sure.
Jam. That was sort of my angle. And so you can't do that without photos of their live shows. So that was
Sure.
really important to me. Yeah.
What did you do to go through and find the perfect pictures and perfect photos for this? What were your ideal photos to use for it?
It was mostly the design team. I can't take too much credit for that,
Okay.
but I did flag certain things where I was like, we should definitely have something, from MTV Unplugged. We should have something from, just like archival footage of Roskilde, just to kind of show what happened there. So really, I flagged some things, but mostly it was them kind of pulling out from the archives to go in tandem with what I was writing about in a certain section of the book.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So in the book, you keep it very much factual based, straight to the points, going through each section and era of their history as we all kind of love it to be in a linear way, as we do on the podcast. Very, very interested in the linear storytelling, of course, with
Yeah.
set lists and all that. But you didn't talk a lot about your fandom. And I think that, with what we do here, it's all about fandom. It's all about, what we put into it and our point of views and just, how we take it in emotionally and physically and everything like that. So you had a little bit of a blurb where you talked about, I believe it was Alpine Valley for PJ20, but let's go back to kind of the beginning with this. How'd you start off as a Pearl Jam fan? And in the book, you talk a little bit about you took a little bit of a break, but what brought you back?
Yeah, so that's a great point that you call out is that I didn't want to make this book about me. I wanted it to be about other fans. And so you mentioned Tanya King, she's actually in here as well. I
Yes.
had show submissions from a lot of different people, journalists, photographers, fans, some very moving, some very interesting. I wanted them to share their experiences with Pearl Jam and why the band mattered to them more than just me, perhaps. But
Mhm.
I did submit my own show memory for PJ20 because that for me was a turning point. So like many of us, I think we're all kind of in a similar age group when we kind of came upon Pearl Jam. I was in Catholic grade school, entering like year, 8, kind of reconciling with my loss of faith and just nonconformity and questioning everything. And friends of mine introduced me to like rock music and our rock station here in Chicago, Q101, who was amazing. Just such a great gateway for so much music. And Pearl Jam super spoke to me, especially, of course, in the beginning with 10. Um, and I love those first three albums so much. And then just with changing music kind of taste and just, my own journey, I fell off a little bit towards Yield and thereafter. Not because I didn't like Pearl Jam. It's just those albums didn't speak to me as much as the first three did, and that probably just says a lot about my narrow-mindedness as a music fan at that point in my life, because it was like these are great rock albums. But PJ 20 was the turning point for me, and so to this day, I can't remember if I saw Pearl Jam before then. I would have to like really go back through my ticket stubs because I've kept all of them from back in the day.
I feel like you would remember, right?
I think I would, but like I feel like there had to be a time before that. But I can't, the reason I can't remember is because PJ 20 was mind-blowing to me. And it to this
Sure.
day, if it's not my top concert of all time, it's my one of my top five. It brought me back into that world and that orbit of what Pearl Jam meant to me, of what it meant to so many others, and of this incredible community that they had fostered and built that was what was so meaningful about music to me. It was the people I connected with in the same, we loved these same bands and these same genres, and we could talk about music no matter if we were from totally different lifespans or walks of life, I mean. And just seeing I'd never seen a concert where so many people from around the world came and were so proud of their countries and had their flags, and language wasn't a barrier. Like everyone
Sure.
was able to talk. So for me, that was the turning point, and that show, I'll never forget it. And Chris Cornell coming out and the rumored Temple the Dog kind of reunion there. It was just, God, that weekend was so incredible.
I was there as well, and I remember it very similarly. It was early in my show going, and I still kind of was trying to get my fandom under me and trying to figure out, like, oh, okay, like, what kind of things do they do live and what kind of people are Pearl Jam fans? And it was a kind of person that I wanted to be. But once you got to see everybody all around you, I mean, I've been to shows at that point in Chicago at Madison Square Garden and a couple other places here and there, but like you don't get to really understand what being a Pearl Jam fan is until you go to a big event like that. And like PJ 20 is probably the ultimate one where like that's the awakening for
Yeah,
everybody because we're all going there for one reason. It's to celebrate not just this band, but the 20th anniversary of this band, the whole entire history, learn a little bit of the history as well within some of the song choices and, you know, Temple playing Startup Champion
yeah,
and going deep and playing like Reach Down and a couple of other those tracks. Like it felt like more of an experience than just going to a weekend's worth of shows. And not just that, but like Alpine Valley doesn't have a lot of shows anymore.
yeah.
And
It
to
was sacred ground, and I feel like
mhm,
Pearl Jam had logged so many of their amazing shows there too.
yeah,
Yeah, it just, and you brought up something that I really appreciate about that show as well, and that I've always appreciated about Pearl Jam is that they have been such torch carriers of their past and what kind of predated Pearl Jam forming, and have always incorporated that into their story. And I love that because there wouldn't be Pearl Jam without Mother Love Bone,
right.
without the Seattle scene, without Mudhoney Green River, and they had Mudhoney at that festival, and I really appreciate that about them.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that kind of keeps bringing you back and you know with all type of fandom that kind of brings in, for lack of better terms, nerds. People that want more information that kind of crave the whole entire backstory. I
Yeah,
think Pearl Jam is kind of perfect for that. I don't see a whole lot of other bands where you're like, want to get the background on the story. You want to do set list diving and get like statistics and things like that. Like
yeah,
Grateful Dead and Fish, the two other bands, Dave Matthews Band, like you can really, put those elements together for that. But like with Pearl Jam, it brings out that inner part of you that wants to consume all of it, that wants to like because you can tell that they're passionate about it. So that rubs off on you.
yeah,
If they're talking in a show, and I've done this many times, especially early on in my show going, where they talk about a song that maybe I'm not paying much attention to on the studio album, then I hear it live. I'm like, whoa, okay. They just told this story. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to understand this song even more, listen to the live performance that maybe came prior to that, and it kind of brings a whole new worldview, and especially because all of their stuff you know, not just from all the official bootlegs that have come out since 2000, but everything prior to that that was archived so well, you
Right.
really get the sense of the timeline of how everything happened, how everything developed. And that's kind of essentially, in a nutshell, what we try to do on this podcast is
Yeah.
just put it all together for everybody and try to relive it all.
Yeah, I super appreciate that. I feel like what you guys have been doing, what Pearl Jam Concert Chronicles has been doing, all those anecdotes are incredible. And I just, I love how much the fan community has expanded into this reservoir of information for people who do want to dig in. And, with my book, like there's a ton of books about Pearl Jam. There's so many people who are much more knowledgeable even than I am about Pearl Jam, even with all the research I did. And so really the purpose was to celebrate this band, but also to give context and story from maybe the people who haven't heard it before, who maybe don't
Sure.
know, the Seattle scene was founded from just so much punk influence and
Right.
the, zines and, Sub Pop and Bruce and Jonathan and how Mother Love Bone and Andy Wood played such a huge effect. And so, I hope that there's things that people can glean from it. And I really wanted to, like I said, get the fan element in there because I think that that is just essential to knowing who Pearl Jam is.
100%. Absolutely. It's what's kept them going throughout the years. It's why they continued after things like Roskilde and other events like that. It is definitely the lifeblood. Now, you know, I mentioned the other books before, and I think every book that's come out about Pearl Jam has had its own unique thing. But what from this book, is there anything that you thought that the other books, and I don't want to, because I've talked to those authors, I respect those authors. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to like say, what did you not want to do that they did? But like, is there anything that you wanted to showcase that maybe another book hadn't showcased before?
Yeah, and all those books are incredible. And I like dug into so many, including the PJ 20 book that Cameron Crowe did
Sure,
with
absolutely.
the other journalists. And they're all incredible. And I think there's so many ways you can kind of pick apart Pearl Jam, but what was most interesting to me was really honing in on this live world and the fandom. And I don't know that the fan part of it has always been told. And I think that I could have filled up a whole book with these beautiful show memories that people have because they
Sure.
were so vivid and captivating. There was like for an example, there was a woman in there who talked about she was sick with cancer last year and she went
That's
to as
Michelle.
many.
She's a good friend of the
Yeah.
podcast. I
Please
love
tell me, is
Michelle
she still,
dearly.
I haven't heard
Yes,
back from her. Oh, thank
she's
goodness.
doing
I'm
great.
so glad. Okay, good.
Yeah.
But I loved her passage because it showed just, she tried to go to so many Dark Matter tour dates as she could last year in the midst of chemo and just she had this beautiful passage about how much music heals and this community just like wrapped their arms around her at a time she really needed them. And I cried when I received it. I mean, like the world of Pearl Jam is just it's there's so much emotion there, and I feel like sometimes we kind of lose that a bit with a lot of the acts that are out nowadays because I don't think that there's that definitely like bands love their fans, but there's not that extension as much as there is with Pearl Jam, and so
Sure.
that to me was the most interesting, and I wanted those voices and that perspective, and really honing in on how Pearl Jam has always been like a band for the people is kind of the best way I can put it.
Yeah.
They've always stood up for their fans too, not just like, loved them, but like they went to bat with Ticketmaster for them and
Mhm.
they were almost quit after Roskilde and just like there's been so many ways that that it's just been such a symbiotic relationship and so that to me was just the most interesting.
Yeah, I think that all kind of gets brought together because, family is brought up so much, whether you want to call it jamly. I don't call it jamly.
Yeah.
That's not a term that I use regularly,
Yeah.
but it's very much a family environment where if you go to a show and you go into the GA, or maybe you're not in the GA, maybe you're just around people before or after, pre-parties, post-parties, whatever, like people try and make it an experience for everyone. They try to make you feel like you're a part of this, especially, you know, I've never experienced first time fans coming in that had never seen the band before that aren't treated like gold here, that aren't beforehand like, oh, like I know there are other bands fans that they do put themselves on a pedestal, and there are Pearl Jam fans that do put themselves on a little bit of a pedestal too, but everybody wants each other to share that same experience because it's just been so powerful. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I don't know how many times I've told people that hadn't seen Pearl Jam before, like, here was what I witnessed my first time, and you're going to witness a completely different story than I'm going to witness.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it all. And I think a lot of that, just the differing set list, the differing stories that you get each night, that brings people back. But also, it's the vulnerability that, especially Ed, has with his fans, that he's able to share stories from his past, from his present, and about his family, something that he's going through. And so sometimes in the past it had been a little bit cryptic before, but it really does feel like he's made that connection with people, so that because he's felt that strong connection just by music. And music is kind of like you said, music heals. It's the strong bond that can end world wars, that can end
Yeah.
division. And
Yeah.
I think we probably don't give it enough credit, but
I agree with
it's
you. I mean, even just like thinking about how the song Alive, the meaning changed of it over time
yeah,
because of the fans, like, holy crap, that is so powerful. That is a dark, dark song.
yeah.
And to the fact that fans took it and made it something else that was so uplifting, like that just speaks volumes to me.
Absolutely. And it,
Yeah.
and it doesn't end there. It's just, the stories can get personal, the
Mhm.
stories from songs. I mean, like you touched up on it when you talked about no code a little bit. And I hope that, you said that you were part of the first three records, but I hope that you've grown the appreciation for no
Oh
code
yeah.
and yield. That those are my two favorite records. And I think you poll most people and they're going to be up there, especially no code. But like no code was really the time for the band where they kind of looked within themselves, and the writing kind of became, you know, less outwardly angry at their situation, instead of like they were trying to then kind of control their situation. Songs like present tense, and sometimes really kind of dig into, like, finding meaning within themselves and finding how to cope with things that you probably can't control.
Right.
And I think that's, as this band has matured, and I've always said that the band has always kind of been like one step ahead of its fan base, where like they're maturing a little bit before everybody else is. They're getting a little bit older, a little bit before everybody else is. But once they got to that stage, and people might be a little behind at some point, they're going to find no code and they're going to be like, oh, okay, this resonates with me now. They're going to find
Yeah.
Lightning Bolt and say this resonates. Songs like Sirens and Future Days, they resonate with us now because we're growing with them.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because I think, like I said, it just I was so young when I first was listening to those first three albums. I was in my teenage years and
Sure.
I just loved rock music. And so when they veered off the path of that, I just from my personal ear at that immature stage, I just kind of fell off. But going back now, I so appreciate the latter works, even up through, I mean, I think Dark Matter is an incredible album. I love that they finally got some Grammy noms again for that. I love what Andrew Watt did on that album. And just you talk about a Pearl Jam fan, like how cool is that? That he was in the fold and didn't try to change them either. And I just I love the experimentation that they did because it just, they've always been nonconformist and done things their own way and they just stuck to their guns. And I appreciate that because they've given so many layers and compositions that if they had just stayed in the same vein as they were with those first three albums, I don't know that they would still be here right now. So,
Yeah, it's tough when you get to, there's certain bands when like you can tell they get to a certain point. It's like, okay, they're treading their tires a little bit. They keep going in the same direction, but like the best music and the best artists are the ones that try to raise the bar, even if it doesn't work and even if it doesn't resonate with the fans. They've at least said to themselves, "I'm not satisfied. I'm not.
yes,
I don't
that
want to sit
personal,
here." Yeah.
yeah, that personal curiosity, I think, is the hallmark of an artist. And it's like if
Mhm.
you're just churning out the same stuff over and over and over, you're probably bored. We're all bored hearing it. And so I appreciate that people who do, they take risks. I think that's really important as a creative. And I'm just so glad that they did that for the past, 20 something years. So, yeah.
What was one of the things in the research of the book that kind of surprised you about this band the most?
I think one of the things that surprised me most, not necessarily of Pearl Jam, but just in the Seattle scene, because I really I wanted to devote a good chunk of the beginning of this book to talk about the foundation of the Seattle scene and all the bands that came before Pearl Jam, because I think it's essential to knowing why Pearl Jam exists and their philosophy and who they are, and also how they've carried the torch, like I said. But the thing that was really interesting to me that I didn't kind of understand before was that the punk influence on the Seattle scene.
Sure.
That, they were in such a remote pocket of the country, and at that point in the 80s and 90s, like mainstream bands did not come that way. It was, true-blooded punk bands, Black Flag and whatnot coming through town. And I don't know why I did not connect the dots to that because I guess, you can hear the punk like underbelly, but it's not totally overt. And I loved that kind of like DIY ethos that they borrowed from that scene. So I guess I didn't really have a great concept of that before doing more of the research for this book that I thought was great. I also really appreciated each individual member much more
Okay.
digging into their stories and their contributions because it kind of changed album to album. Like there was different leaders and there was different people who pulled back and there was different people dealing with certain things. And um, I think uh, Ed still remains the most fascinating person to me. I think he's such a complex character. And I really it was so interesting that, the fact that obviously he came from San Diego and was an outlier, and he just totally changed this band and everything with the Mama Son demos and making like his own version of Tommy. I mean, I appreciated the complexity of him a lot more than before. I love the moments Ed talks and shows.
Yeah.
I mean, the band always has my attention, but I am dialed in. He is such an incredible storyteller.
Yeah.
And I think particularly like we're spoiled in Chicago because he has personal connections to here. And so there's always a really
Sure.
moving story. The last time, maybe not, no, not the last time. It was when they did the United Center shows a couple years ago. He talked a bit about going back to where his grandma lived,
Yes. That
and
was one of my
meeting.
favorite stories from that show.
Oh my God. And like meeting the people who lived there and they brought them in. Like I just
Yeah.
was like, am I gonna cry at a Pearl? I mean, I often cry at a Pearl Jam show now, but I love that he's just so normal and takes down the facade and there's no like airs there. And I've only met one member of the band to date, Matt Cameron, and it was just by happenstance. I work with the band Ministry a bit, and so they had a show in Seattle, and I was backstage talking to some girlfriends at the show, and this guy comes behind us, his voice, he's like, "Hey, so what's your favorite Ministry album?" And I turned around, it's Matt Cameron. I was like, Matt Cameron wants my opinion on my favorite Ministry album? Like, but that's who they are, is like they're just such warm people.
Yeah.
My brother worked for the Cubs for a bit, and he often would kind of bring Ed into the clubhouse, and he would tell me stories of how Ed like gives guitar lessons to players if they want them.
That's
And
funny.
I mean, it's cool. It's just like they're such down to earth people with their own. That's the other thing that I really dug when I was researching this book is their fandom informing what they wanted their band to be. I think every band
Yeah.
obviously is a fan of somebody,
Yeah.
but they were so passionate about the bands they loved and what they loved about those bands, even to the point where when they were like, we're doing no more music videos because Ed was like, I hate that you're taking away what I used to love about music, putting on my headphones and coming up with my own visuals.
Yeah.
Like they took so piecemeal, like little pieces they love from all the bands that they championed. And I think that they're just so on the level with their fans. And I don't know many bands that are like that.
Yeah, it's just so apparent throughout their whole entire history. You can tell like what songs I go back all the time and I'm trying to find like little bits of the Who in Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what kind of anthemic moments? Like, obviously, Better Man I think is a big one because that is very much spurned off of the Pete Townsend version of Save It for Later. I mean, Devo is another big one. There's a song called Gut Feeling, which actually they the Earthlings in Ohana just kind of opened up with Gut Feeling at that show. And
Cool.
if you listen to Gut Feeling, the chorus is got some. Gut feeling, got some if you need it. Like those
Yeah.
little things, it's not, they're not completely uh taking bits and pieces, taking songs and redoing them, but like they're just little hints of what, the music that came before them that they love so dearly. I think in their way, it's like we're just trying to pass it off to the next generation so that somebody can hear gut feeling, somebody that can hear the the Townsend version or the original version and save it for later and say, okay, that's where Ed got that from. I think to them, like that's a bit of the reward from it is that people can understand where they come from musically and how it affects them.
Yeah, I love how much they wear that on their sleeves. I think it's, other people probably would, oh, I don't want to talk about my influences. There's so many bands when I've interviewed them. I mean, it's not often a question I ask either because I think it's kind of dull, but
Yeah,
who don't want to cop to an influence because they want to be seen as original and as you
sure.
should, and you are original creators. But I love how much they wear their fandom for the bands that they loved on their sleeves and they impart that into the community of Pearl Jam.
I'm very curious. So you went through and you talked about some shows and a lot of the big shows, the
Yeah.
Soldier Field type shows, and
Yeah.
as we mentioned, Alpine Valley. Did you do a lot of research, like going back and listening to just even random bootlegs and like which ones stood out to you and maybe, ones that you didn't even use for the book? Like what bootlegs really are kind of some of your favorite? And they don't even have to be shows that you've been to before.
Yeah. Listening to all the bootlegs would have been a full-time job, so I was not able to listen to all of them. I mean,
Hey,
but
hey, don't that's kind of a full-time job for me, you know.
oh my God,
It's
I mean, it's incredible how much just of the discography we have from
yeah.
their live shows. But yeah, definitely some. I would say I did focus on some of the bigger stuff, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
just because there was so much meat to it. The Soldier Field show, like you said, but there were some smaller ones like the Apache Nation show,
Sure.
where Pearl Jam went and was trying to really help the reservation, and Ed got into the fracas with the fan, heckling him, and I also wanted to point out the Temple of the Dog, the one and only tour they did. So I did
Yeah.
a little snippet from that. The home shows, because I thought it was really important how much, they've always been about causes that are dear to them, but just really putting that into action. So I not only picked like the big ones, the marquee ones, but also for the very different reasons that made those certain shows special and unique. I mean, because
Sure.
my God, there's 1,100 and counting Pearl Jam shows, and I painstakingly typed each one of those out that you'll see in the book.
Oh my goodness.
There's a whole log of every single show they've ever done, and I
How come we didn't
painstakingly.
get together before you were in the book? I could have made your job so much
You know
easier.
what though? No, I think I liked that I did that because there's something tactical about it, and like typing it all out that just made it more what is the word? I'm glad I did it actually. I think it was part of the effort. I needed to do it. I think it, I needed to understand the gravity and the magnitude of how many shows they have done.
Fair.
So
That's a good point.
I wanted to do it honestly. I could have done it an easier way, but I wanted to. And I wanted to like also because for me it kind of as I typed it out, I was thinking about like the touring routing or where they were in a certain year, or, different festivals they were playing. And so for me there was real intention behind that, absolutely. But yeah, there's so many shows to choose from. I could have done just a whole book on that. And that really was like what I grappled with when trying to figure out how to write this book because I could have made it just, pulling out highlights from 1,100 shows. But to me, I was like, that might get dry after a while.
Sure.
And I really felt like there needed to be the context of the story in the background as much as there's been so many biographies of the band. So I tried to pull out really important live moments within the framework of the history to kind of show how they dovetailed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm actually very curious when you were inputting all of those shows. Is there any of those shows that you looked at and you're like, what the heck could they have done in this place? Like, did any of those, because they got some weird ones there from just like weird spots in the US to,
I know.
some places in Japan
I
and
know,
South
I know.
America. Was there like any spot you're like, huh, like Croatia, like what they do in Croatia?
Oh yeah, they went to some far corners of the earth that like I was like, I've never heard of this place ever in my life. Some places in South America, I think, where I was like, where the hell even is this? And the fact
Yeah,
that this band would go there, but also just kind of like the patterns of what they did. I mean, obviously they were so staunchly a part of the European tour market for a long time out
Sure.
of really necessity with what happened during the Ticketmaster era. Um, but just the repetitive like festivals they would play or how they really, back in 2023 or 22 when they just did like 7 shows or obviously COVID year they had to take off, but there were years where they maybe had 2 shows or just the bridge school benefits.
Right.
Um, it was fascinating because there was no, trying to figure out the algebra behind it. I'm like, there's no rhyme or reason to this.
Right.
But again, it's like they always keep you guessing and what are they going to do? And if they announce something, you have to pounce on it because who knows if they're going to take 3 years off. You just don't know with a band like Pearl Jam.
Exactly. Yep. And I mean, we're sitting at a point. I mean, you kind of wrote the book at such a strange time because I saw there was one thing in there that I'm like, oh no, I don't want to read this part, but it said like, 27 years and in parenthesis and counting that Matt Cameron's been in the band. I'm like, oh, you
Yeah, he had some
just
great
missed
timing
that.
with that announcement. He announced that right after the book went to the printers.
Oh
So,
no.
yeah. But you know what? I'd take a silver lining with that because I really wanted to celebrate Matt Cameron in this book. I think
Sure.
he is so essential to this band. The drummer role has always been an interesting part of this band, but him locking it down for 27 years up until now. So I'm kind of glad it worked out the way it did, that I didn't have to talk about him leaving, that it's more of a celebration of Matt.
Fair enough. I
Yeah.
fully agree. It sucks that we have to talk about him in that way, that it's in the past tense instead of the present, but it's part of the
I know, and
drummer
it would have been
circus
like
that's followed this band.
it would have been a whole other chapter of like conjecture of what are they going to do next? Like I
Yeah.
can't even fathom what they're like, who the hell they're going to try to get to fill that role at this point.
I
Um,
I feel
and
like
look
I
at what
think
they do,
about it daily and I have no answers.
right? And it's like, I mean, it can't be the end of Pearl Jam. We know that that's not going to happen,
Right.
hopefully, knock on wood. But the dynamic, I'm worried a little bit, honestly, about how the dynamic might change a bit. Because Matt has been so dialed into that position and the drummer role has been so essential really to like the evolving sound of Pearl Jam, I think too. I mean, you look at Jack Irons and what he brought to the band. So I'm worried, honestly, about the choice they're going to make.
Yes, it's been on, I think, all of our minds so much. And,
Yeah.
the thing is, it's like, okay, are they going to hire somebody younger so they can stick around and have the kind of stamina that Matt was apparently losing a little bit of? Or are they going to hire somebody that is a hand that's been, around the band circles for so long that they can trust? And, like you said, there's an air of mystery around this band, and they just do not give you any answers for anything until it's time to get the answer. But, you know, it'll either be like this roll out the red carpet
Yeah.
and like, okay, we're not going to announce it before the show begins. And then once the curtain's lifted, you'll get to see whoever's back there and be like, okay, there's our answer. Or they'll just throw it at the end of a newsletter, be like, okay, this is our guy.
Yeah.
See
Right.
you at the next show.
Exactly.
It's good.
Exactly.
It's ceremoniously unceremonious in
But
any way, shape, or form.
if Matt because his response was also a little veiled, right? And I do appreciate that. Like part of it probably is age, and he did say that that's just
Yeah,
becoming too much for him, and I can super appreciate that. I mean, these guys are not young, and they do
right.
marathon shows as we all know to this point. But if there's a little part of that that maybe a Soundgarden reformation, I'll be into that too.
We'll just have to see.
I
I
know.
mean, they've talked
I'm
about
putting
it
it out there. I just want
before.
to put it into the ether.
Yeah,
Matt Cameron, if you're listening.
there was the thing that
Uh,
they did like 6 months ago, and I can't
yeah.
remember the singer's name, but like I know Brandy Carlisle's
Yeah,
been
Brandy.
kind
Yep.
of the one that if they
I'd
were
be
ever
so
to
there for
do,
that.
yeah, absolutely. I
Were you at
mean,
the Chris Cornell tribute where she played with them for the first time?
I was not at the Chris
Okay.
Cornell tribute, but
Oh man, I have chills.
I do have a great Brandy connection to Pearl Jam story. She was playing a festival near where I was living in Connecticut at the time, and a festival that is no longer in. It's called Soundside Festival,
Okay.
and midway through the show, she's introducing her band, and I didn't even put two and two together, but she's like, "Our drummer over there, he's a legend from Seattle. That's Matt Chamberlain." I'm like, Matt Chamberlain's playing with Brandy Carlisle. This is the coolest thing in the world. Like, I didn't ever expect to see a Pearl Jam drummer outside of Pearl Jam play.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
neat. So
Love it. I love Brandy. All those people from Washington State, I swear, they're just, I don't know what is in
they're a
the
team.
water up there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they stick together.
Yeah. Love
Absolutely.
it. Love it.
Uh, one last thing before we go, you
Yeah, go
mentioned some of the fan run services, in the book, and like I really appreciate that you give us a little bit of love in there. We've been mentioned in other books, and it doesn't get tiring to see that your work is appreciated. So I really thank you for bringing this up because that's
ahead.
why we do it to get recognized a little bit.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Five Horizons that have to get mentioned, 2 Feet Thick that have to get mentioned, Pearl Jam Concert Chronology, but some of the fan organizations, I feel like those type of websites and podcasts, like they keep this fandom going at times like this, where and granted, I say that by not putting out a lot of content recently, but
Yeah.
it's still when there's nothing going on with the band, we try to keep the stories going, just like keep something in the interim. But like when it came to research or finding a direction, you said that a lot of what you wanted to focus in on was the fan perspective. But like, what from these publications did you get out of trying to tailor the book towards?
Yeah, and there were like so many different things that came to the folds. But I think what I love about what you do and the other organizations and fan sites you mentioned is that the curation you guys do and the research on your own that you do to find these like anecdotes and ticket stubs and recollections of people who were at these shows that I mean that was amazing. And I try to put some of those in the book as well where they fit. But running through all of those just kind of put me in the headspace of um, what was going on at that specific time, the little eggs you guys pulled out of those specific shows and eras. So those were like running timelines in my background as I was kind of writing and I was referencing back as well. But so it was in tandem of like that with these other fan voices. Ricky Ratman's in the book.
Yep.
Um, Richard Beanstalk, who wrote the Lollapalooza Uncensored Histories in the book, because I thought it was very
Still
important
love
to
that
get
band.
some real context because I think Lollapalooza was a huge turning point for Pearl Jam, of course, and so I want
Absolutely.
to get that context in the book. So a lot kind of came to the fold, and I honestly wish I could have made this book double what it is, but my publishers would have murdered me. So I
Yeah.
had to like whittle it down a bit to try to get all those different kind of things into one pot that was boiling over. But yeah, I'm just so in awe of the Pearl Jam community and the fans and how much painstaking time and love and effort goes into creating these collections of memories and mementos so that, like you said, whether it's a new time fan who's like, I want to dive into this world of Pearl Jam, or it's someone like myself who came back to them at a later time, or it's someone who's been a fan forever and maybe they just want to dive back into an era and feel nostalgic. I think it's incredible what everyone has kind of done to lift up this community and make it relevant at all points these past 35 years.
Couldn't said it better.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for something to read, especially the holidays coming up and looking for gifts for the holidays, Pearl Jam Live! Exclamation point. 35 years of legendary music and revolutionary shows. This was Selena Fragassi who wrote this book, did all the hard work that you expect for a Pearl Jam fan to do whenever putting it into anything. So we thank you for writing the book. We thank you for joining us today. And also, forgot to mention, but there's a forward by Scott Lucas from Local H, and that's a really, really good story. And I would just definitely get the book and read the forward, and you're going to enjoy that. So thank you so much for coming on. We can't wait to see what the response with the book is
Me
going to
too.
be
Thank
like.
you so much for having me.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
If you would like a free copy of the book that we just spoke about with Selena, signed by Selena, then all you got to do is send an email to liveonfourlegspodcast@gmail.com. And the information that we're looking for is pick any show that you want to see us cover on the podcast in 2026. It could be any show, any era, one that you've been to before. Hell, you can even pick one that we've done before. It doesn't matter. As long as we get to hear from you, send it to liveonfourlegspodcast@gmail.com and you will be entered into the contest to win a free book signed by Selena. So do that. The deadline for sending the emails will be November 15th, so make sure you send and enter now.